The IL-2 Korea developers gave me access to exclusive in-game VR gameplay footage, and what you're watching in the background right now is real Korea footage captured in VR. Now, just to be clear, this comes from a development build, so it does not represent the final product, and I don't know exactly when it was recorded. The final version of the game could look, run and feel even better. But even with that in mind, this already looks pretty insane. We have VR flying, VR shooting, cockpit action and a lot of movement, although I don't know if this is single player, multiplayer or a mix of both. So while this exclusive gameplay runs in the background, let's talk about the big news. The release date has changed, early access is still happening, and now we know exactly what players will get when early access begins. There's a lot of important stuff to talk about and cover, so let's start with the video. Now, the first big update is that the full official release of IL-2 Korea has been moved to August 4th, 2026. So technically it has been delayed, but honestly I think this is actually very good news, because according to the developers, they are receiving a huge amount of detailed feedback from players taking part in the beta testing, and that feedback is already having a real impact on their priorities. So instead of rushing the full release, they decided to take a little more time to polish the core gameplay, fix critical bugs, improve performance and deliver a more complete and enjoyable experience at launch. And to me that sounds like really good news, and it's always welcome. I know nobody likes waiting longer, but if the team is using that extra time to improve the game based on real player feedback, that should be beneficial for all of us. So yes, the full release is now planned for August 4th, but I personally see this as a healthy decision. It shows that the developers are listening, are adjusting and trying to make sure Korea launches in a better state. But the good news, and the most important part, is early access has not been delayed. So early access is still starting on June 25th, 2026, and this does not mean that everyone has to wait until August to play the game. If you already pre-order Korea, or if you decide to pre-order before early access begins on June 25th, you will still be able to start playing on June 25th. Now, of course, early access is not the final version of the game, and the developers are being very clear about that. But it will already include a meaningful first experience with Korea, including aircraft, core systems, missions, multiplayer features, settings, controls and graphic options. So the way I see it, August 4th is now the target for the full official release, while June 25th is still the moment when pre-order players can finally start flying and testing the sim for themselves. And that brings us to the most important question: what exactly will be available when the early access begins? Now, first of all, the museum mode will be available from the start. This will let players explore aircraft and other in-game objects, learn about their history and characteristics, check cockpit equipment diagrams, aircraft variants, paint schemes, piloting tips, animations, sounds, and even use a quick fly now option with the selected aircraft. So this whole museum thing should not only be for visual references, it should also work as a learning tool for every aircraft. Then we have the single missions. Early access will include a selected set of story missions with briefings based on existing game content and pre-configured scenarios involving the in-game AI. So this is not the full final single-player experience yet, but there will be playable single-player content from the beginning in the early access. The mission planner will also be available with 3 basic mission types at the start of early access: free flight, duel and dogfight. So players will be able to quickly test aircraft, practice combat and create simple flying or fighting scenarios without needing to jump into something more complex. And here's a very important one: the multiplayer will be available from the very start of early access. The devs confirm a large team deathmatch mission, several official 24/7 servers with different difficulty settings, and players will also be able to host their own dogfights and cooperative servers directly from the game or use the dedicated server application. The exams feature will also be included, although not for every aircraft at first. 4 of the 8 aircraft will have 4 special exam missions available during early access, and the remaining 4 aircraft will receive those missions at full release. Now, they are also preparing a more accessible setup experience with detailed explanations for game options, a device mapping wizard for unrecognized controllers, and more than 70 control mapping templates with layout diagrams for different devices. And honestly, that sounds very good, especially for new players or anyone using different joysticks, throttle pedals and/or AORUS setups. And finally, on the graphics and performance side, which is extremely important, at least for me, Early access will let us test technologies like upscaling with FSR, DLSS, OpenVR, OpenXR, indirect ray tracing, lighting and other available options. And the mention of FSR and DLSS is especially important because those upscaling technologies can make the game much more accessible for lower-end or mid-range systems. In simple terms, these upscaling technologies allow the game to run at a lower internal resolution and then upscale the image, which can give you much smoother performance at the cost of some visual fidelity. And since the footage you're watching right now is in VR gameplay, this is a very important topic for anyone planning to fly Korea with a VR headset. So, early access is not the final version of the game, but at the same time this does not sound like an empty demo. It will already include the museum mode, single missions, the mission planner, multiplayer, which is gonna be one of the most interesting things of the early access, the exams mode, VR support from the beginning, and a lot of stuff for us to play around. Now here's one quick but important information. Last week, IL-2 Great Battles received a new update which restored offline access for Steam users after some login issues. But the interesting part is that the developers also mentioned Korea specifically. IL-2 Korea will have offline mode available for all users regardless of whether they purchase the game through Steam or through the official IL-2 website. So in case you're worried about being locked out of offline content because of a Steam login issue or an online connection problem, don't worry, that should not be the case with IL-2 Korea. Now before we reach the end of the video, let's talk very quickly about the exclusive VR footage you've been watching in the background, because there are a few very interesting details here and there that I want to discuss. First of all, we have a takeoff sequence in the IL-10 and we can see a very impressive cockpit quality. But the most interesting detail for me is that we can actually see the pilot's hand moving the throttle. The developers had already confirmed that Korea will allow players to turn pilot visibility on or off, and for VR I think that could be a huge boost for immersion compared to Great Battles. After takeoff, we can also see the airfield with several MiG-15s parked and what appears to be a Lavashkin La-11. And what stands out to me is the forest density. The trees really look extremely dense. There's something about the ambience that makes the airfield feel surrounded by life. And what's even more important, the footage looks quite smooth. Then we see the IL-10 strafing anti-aircraft units on the ground, again with strong cockpit vibrations while firing, and even the infantry running for their lives. There is also a short runway sequence where the pilot looks around the cockpit and opens the canopy. And take a look at the lighting and reflections on the asphalt, they look really good. And then we jump straight into some air combat footage, with an F-80 shooting star chasing a North Korean Yak-9 diving away. And one more time, the cockpit vibration while firing looks fantastic, and when the Yak is hit by the 50 cols, the damage effect also look very nice. The black smoke coming from the damaged engine is especially impressive in how dense it is, and then we can see the engine failing and catching on fire. And then we see a Yak firing directly into the cockpit of an F-51 Mustang, tearing into pieces off the fuselage before the aircraft goes down. And finally, the footage ends with a beautiful panoramic flight from an F-51 Mustang, showing the map from the air, the clouds and that huge distant horizon that really gives a strong sense of scale. So again, this is a development footage and we still need to test the final experience ourselves, but as a first look at IL-2 Korea running in VR, in-game real footage, I think this is extremely exciting and a positive thing. Alright folks, that's gonna be all for today's video, and massive thanks to the developers for sharing this exclusive VR footage with me. I already pre-ordered Korea and I will be covering early access as soon as it starts. I will be flying it in VR with my Pimax Crystal Super, so if you're looking for a high-end VR headset for flight sims, especially to play IL-2 Korea or Great Battles, you can find my link and a nice discount code in the descriptions and the comment section. It also helps support the channel, so thank you if you decide to check it out. And if you're still unsure about buying Korea now or waiting, stay tuned because I will be sharing my honest impressions as soon as I can. Thanks for watching guys, I'm Brigadier Fox, and see you up there in the skies.